Peace be upon you. This is Said Mirza from willyourreason.com. And in today's talk, I wanted to look at 10 questions that are usually directed towards the Quran alone followers or the Quranists or the Quraniyun by usually Sunni Muslims. Of course, Shia Muslims have the same questions more or less. Basically, the people who follow the religion of Islam, who take the Quran and the Sunnah or the Hadith together, um, they have a hard time understanding that the Quran alone is sufficient for our guidance. And usually, the questions, uh, the basis for them is actually that they have already assumed that the religion that they were born into, that was passed on to them by their ancestors, which they are blindly following and which their ancestors also blindly followed, that is true and correct. So this is the assumption on which all the questions arise. And so obviously, unless you let go of this assumption, which is wrong, that your religion is correct and true, and that is ordained by God, once you let go of that assumption, this is the stumbling block, if you will. You will not be able to grasp what the Quran is saying and what the Quran wants you to do, what God wants you to do. So these are low effort questions because the answers to these questions are already in the Quran. If you have read the Quran carefully, you will have answers to these questions. But obviously, if you don't take the time to actually research a topic and you just come up with these questions, which are really not indicative of them trying to understand a point of view or to learn, what these questions are basically arguments to shut the other party up. This is what it is. This is the spirit of the questions. So a true seeker of knowledge, or true seeker of guidance, they would not be asking these questions because they would sincerely look at the text themselves to see whether they are correct or not, and to change accordingly. Anyway, so these questions, I'm not going to go over the verses of the Quran. This has already been done. If you look at my past videos, you can search on a topic. You'll find videos on, they'll give you the specific verses where these answers are. I'm not going to go into that because these are low effort questions. So I'm not going to put in the effort to give you the verses. This is a low effort answer, if you will. But I think it's enough for someone who has no idea what's going on to actually, kind of come to the Quran again and actually read it carefully and see whether what they have been taught by their ancestors, by their elders, is actually correct or not. So the first question, surprise, surprise, is how do you perform the prayer using the Quran alone? Now, there's been much talk about this, and obviously a lot of Quranists have different interpretations of what the salat means according to the Quran. I would just like to point out that this word salat, if you look in the Quran, and this is not my understanding of it, this is not something that I came up with. This was actually done by Brother Garens in his translation of Quran Complete Revelation, where he went through this word salat in the Quran, all of the instances of this word salat, and then derive its meaning, which is duty. Now, a lot of anger and hatred is directed towards this conclusion that salat means duty, but actually this is how the Quran is using this word. Now, is worship a duty? Yes, correct, it is a duty. Is all duty worship? No, there's other duties: remembering God, being kind to your parents, giving your wealth, fasting. These are all duties. But to say that salat alone encompasses just this ritualistic prayer which has been taught to you by your parents, who were in turn taught by their parents, which, by the way, the exact implementation of it, the mechanics of it, and this it's actually a yoga movement. If you actually look at it carefully, it's a yoga movement, right? So this yoga movement in its totality is not in the Quran, when the Quran is saying that it is complete, sufficient, fully detailed. So the question again arises: how do you perform the prayer using the Quran alone? Okay, so that component of the salat, the worship salat, you perform that by standing up and glorifying God. Now, there are certain prerequisites to this, as in you have to wash yourself, which is called wudu, and I guess the religious parlance, and ablution. It's a way to fast. It's a way to wash yourself, and then once you wash yourself, you're clean. Then you can approach God, and the way to do this is to stand up and glorify God, and that you ask Him for His help and you thank Him for His favors. And the point of the prayer is to remember God. So this is the point. As long as you're fulfilling the purpose of the prayer, then that's all there is to it. Now, whether you should bow 2 times or prostrate 4 times, and how many times you have to do this, etc., etc. The Quran does not mention this because this is an innovation. The Quran explicitly uses the word for standing up, aqim, and that's all it is. So to say that this bowing and prostrating is part of the prayer is not correct. The bowing and prostrating, there's no harm in it. You can do it if you want, but just understand that this is not what God is commanding in the Quran. The purpose of the prayer is to remember God. Again, this is the central point that is missed. As long as you're fulfilling that purpose of remembering God, then the rest of it is just kind of the yoga movements, right? And there's no harm in doing that if that's what you've been taught and that's how you feel that you're drawing closer to God. But again, there is no set prayer and how to go about it in the movements, etc. This is not in the Quran. It's just to stand up and glorify God. And as far as what you should be saying when glorifying God, you have the Surah Al-Fatiha, the first chapter of the Quran. That's a good prayer. And then also you have other prayers in the Quran. And if you want those prayers, I have compiled that list in my book, Believe Not Reason. I think it's the last chapter, so you can go and look at those prayers and then recite those when you are standing up and remembering God. So this is the answer to the question, how do you perform the prayer using Quran alone? Now, obviously, this answer will not satisfy someone who is born and bred on religion. He has a rigid interpretation of what God wants him to do, almost like God wants him to be a robot. So he's looking for those instructions. Those instructions are not in the Quran, and that's a fact. The Quran asks us to use reason, and God wants us to grow, and to give you those sort of instructions, step by step, detailed, defeats that purpose. So that's the answer. Now the next question is related: how many prayers to perform in a day? Okay, so this is in the Quran. There are 2 prayers that are obligatory upon the mu'mineen, the believers. And there's a distinction between a believer, a mu'min, and a Muslim, a submitter. A mu'min is a higher class, if you will, a higher grade. Anyway, so the obligatory prayers are 2. There's one at sunrise and one at sunset. And then there's an extra prayer which is recommended to be performed at night. Like I said, when I'm saying the word prayer, I'm just saying it means to remember God, glorify Him. And obviously, what's the best way to do that? Well, by reading the dhikr, the remembrance of God, which is the Quran. So the way I usually do it is that I stand up and I glorify God, and after performing the ablution, and then I sit down and I read the Quran. Okay, how many rakats are in each prayer? Okay, this is those people, the Sunni Muslims, they already know what I'm talking about, and the Shia Muslims. The rakat is just a unit in each prayer that divides the prayer. There are no rakats in a prayer. Like I said, this is a general term. Worship is remembrance of God. If you told someone who is an American, for instance, you said, pray to God, they would take it to mean, as in just pray to God, remember Him. Maybe they might do it the way they were taught, which in the Christian worldview is kneeling and being humble to God. So, like I said, these are all these movements. They are not something that are being prescribed in the Quran. If you feel like they are bringing you closer to God, then sure, do it. But don't say that this is how it should be done, and then turn around to the Quran and say, look, it's not in the Quran, because then you just invented something, and then you're trying to shoehorn in it into the Quran, the text which claims to be fully detailed, clear, and self-referencing. Okay, next question is related. These are all questions that, again, the idea is that we are already on the right path. We already have inherited this correct, perfect religion, and now you guys are saying that the Quran is sufficient. But guess what? We are not able to find the rituals that we have inherited from our forefathers. So therefore, the Quran is not complete, and now we need the Hadith and Sunnah. And by doing that, what you are saying, you that's what you're saying, that you disbelieve in the Quran's claim that it is preserved, it's fully detailed, it's clear, and that God left something out of it, which is now being supplemented by Mr. Bukhari. That's what you're saying. Okay, so how do you perform Hajj using the Quran alone? Okay, so the Hajj that we have right now, that is being practiced in Makkah, Saudi Arabia, is pure idolatry, and I made videos on that. You can again look in my YouTube channel for that content. There really is no debate about it, this is not something that I'm saying. It's well known. The Jews claim the same thing about the Muslims, that they're idolaters, and they're correct, because to revere a stone cuboid structure and to circle it 7 times and then go around and do that whole complete circuit of the Safa and Marwa, and then also to go and then collect stones, because you see that the emphasis is on the stones here. Then collect stones and then throw them at 3 pillars, which are supposed to represent Satan. These are all pagan practices. So as a whole, the Hajj that's being performed is idolatry. And the fact of the matter is that the site of the Masjid al-Haram, which is referred to in the Quran, that original site is lost. What we have here is basically idolatry that's being performed in Makkah, Saudi Arabia, and it's the revering, the worship of a stone cube idol. That's what it is. So how do you perform Hajj using the Quran alone? The Hajj that's being performed in the Quran, that's being referred to in the Quran, was for a specific time and place, and for those people who knew the rites and knew the timings and knew the location. We don't have any of that, so unfortunately we cannot perform the Hajj using the Quran alone. So it's not something that's obligatory upon the mu'min, the believers. So this is a related question. Do you know about the ihram clothing with just Quran alone? Now, the ihram clothing is this the wrapping about of the sheets on the pilgrim, the way they do it. If you Muslims, if you just go and look up videos of how Muslims performing Hajj, you'll see them wearing like a white, 2 white robes and cloth pieces, and they have them kind of twisted around on their body. Yeah, this guidance on how to what the ihram clothing needs to be, or what material it has to be, what color it has to be, how it should be wrapped around your body. This is not present in the Quran, because guess what? The ihram clothing is that is donned when doing Hajj, which I said is idol worship. And the dress that the Muslim men wear during the Hajj is actually very similar to the kasaya clothing. It's orange tinted in the Buddhist tradition. So the Buddhist monks, they wear that kasaya clothing. If you look up pictures on that, just type in kasaya, Kasaya clothing worn by Buddhist monks. You will see that they are wearing the same ihram clothing, if you will, the Muslims wear. Which again, if you study the pagan religion, especially Buddhism and Hinduism, you will see a lot of correlation with the practices of the religion of Islam as regards to Hajj, and that should give you enough evidence, if you have eyes to see, that what your ancestors were doing is idol worship. Okay, next question is related to the Hajj. How do you know when to perform Hajj if many Quraniyun cannot agree on the months of the Hijri calendar. Now, the Hijri calendar is the made-up calendar that the Muslims came up with, and they say that this is, because they wanted their calendar, right? There's the Gregorian calendar, there's the Chinese calendar, and so the Muslims wanted a Hijri calendar. So this is all just nonsense. Anyway, so the Hajj being performed during Muhammad's time is no more. As I mentioned, we don't know the location, the original site of the Hajj, and certainly what they were doing over there had nothing to do with idol worship, which is the bread and butter of the Saudi Hajj. And so the community at that time knew the place and time of the Hajj, which we don't know. So like I said, we can't perform the Hajj. But if you want to go ahead and pay for a Hajj package to the corrupt Saudis to finance their lavish lifestyle, and circle a stone cube idol 7 times and throw stones at some pillars, then knock yourself out. But don't claim that this is what God told you to do, since none of these shenanigans are in the Quran. And if you want to challenge me on that, then I will convert to Sunniism right now. If you can find the verse that states the 7 times circling of this cube idol in the Quran, this 7 times, show me where in the Quran it says to do any circumambulation or whatever. Even if you twist the verses, the words, you will obviously go refer to your favorite Sunni translation and say, look, the word tawaf, it means circling. Okay, fine, circling, circumambulation, whatever, in that word doesn't mean circling. But anyway, if you want to even corrupt the translation, the meaning of that word, you will still not find the 7 times. And let's be realistic, this 7 times circling is the highlight of the Hajj, the critical component of Hajj, which is not in the Quran. So again, these things, you can get to them if you have an open and sincere heart. But if you are dead set on following your ancestors blindly and using the Quran as a crutch, then you're gonna have deep problems, serious problems. Now, the next question, this was asked to me by my uncle, who is a staunch Sunni, Wahhabi actually. He said, how can you bury the dead using the Quran alone? And these sort of questions are to me, they're just funny, sad and funny, because again, the whole emphasis is on these rituals and rites. How do you bury the dead? How do you do circumcision, etc., etc.? If a guy is dead, he's dead, and it doesn't make a difference what you do with the body. His book of deeds is closed. So, but to answer his question, the Quran does relate the story of God sending down a raven to scratch the earth to show the son of Adam how to bury his brother whom he had killed. And so going off of that, we would assume that to bury the dead, we would just dig a hole in the ground and then bury them, which is usually how it's done in pretty much all over the world, religion or no religion. Everyone buries their dead. I mean, I'm sure that there's outliers where they put them on a hill or something and have the crows eat them, or like the Hindus, they burn the body. There are outliers, I understand, but usually the dead are buried there. The hole is dug, and then either they're buried in a shroud, or they're put up in a box or whatever. So this has nothing to do with following the Quran alone. Okay. The question of the burial shroud, what material it needs to be, how it needs to be wrapped around the body, what should the body be washed, how should it be washed, and other rituals are honestly unimportant. I have no interest in them, and I think someone who has a kind of a higher level understanding of the Quran will say, yeah, this is all pointless stuff. And again, I want to reiterate, the guy is dead, and his book of deeds is now closed. It's over for him. Doesn't make a difference. Now, this one is kind of an intellectual question, so this deserves a little bit more serious answer. How can you not trust the hadith when the Quran was preserved the same exact way by the same exact people? Says who? Says your false hadith? This is where you're coming from, because nowhere in the Quran does it say that this was preserved by this isnad chain, this chain of transmitters. Nowhere does it say that. This is just your stories that you have concocted in the hadith, and then you're saying, okay, the hadith are preserved the same way as the Quran. And actually, in fact, I can prove this to anyone. You don't need to know all the technical names of this nonsense. Look at the hadith. You have the chain of transmissions. Abu Huraira narrated to this Sheikh, whatever, Abu, and then Abu and Abu, and this and this and that, all the way to Prophet Muhammad, right? This is how this chain of transmissions works, the isnad. Where in the Quran is there any narration chain? The Quran there's no verse in the Quran, there's no chapter in the Quran that starts out with Abu Hurairah narrated this to this and that. So on that basis, what you're saying is false, and you know that, right? You know that the Quran is not does not need the attestation of men, the distinct chain of transmissions to give it authenticated. On the contrary, there's obviously problems with the hadith, and this is why this workaround was come up with, that we'll just attach this chain of transmission to give this hadith authenticity. Whereas in the Quran, this is never done, because the Quran is actually preserved by God. God has taken upon himself to preserve the Quran, and not by the people. This is the critical part, right? We place our trust in God, not in people. So we place the trust in God, that God has preserved the Quran. And there are, if you want to go back and look at some of the manuscripts, they're older manuscripts. I think the Birmingham library or collection has a very old Quranic manuscript that's been carbon dated. Just look it up on Wikipedia, Birmingham Quranic manuscript. You will find that this, if you can read Arabic and look at some, that specific text in that manuscript, if you looked at what we have here currently in your hands, you will find that it's one-to-one correlation. So that is a proof point that the Quran has been preserved. But again, we still believe that God has sent down the Quran, and he has taken upon himself to preserve it. So we put our trust in God. And I'll give you an analogy of why I think that's the case, that the Quran is I actually believe that why the Quran is preserved and that is intact and it's complete. Because the next question is kind of a follow-on to this question. Okay, this was asked to me by my younger uncle, who was also who was in flux. He used to be pretty moderate, but then he got on that Saudi Wahhabi train, and he became more of a staunch Saudi kind of Wahhabiist. But now he's kind of gone back to making money. So he has kind of changed a little bit his tack. But anyway, let's see what that question was. Okay, so the question was, how do you know that nothing was added or deleted from the Quran after Prophet Muhammad? Because God has taken upon himself to preserve the text. So that's how we know that nothing was added or deleted from the Quran after Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so then there's a follow-up question to this, because I guess that kind of made sense to him, and he said, okay, yeah, so God has taken upon himself to preserve it. So again, the question is not about seeking knowledge, it's about arguing, right? So the follow-up question then is, well, then how do you know that this verse that says that God has taken upon himself to preserve the message, how do you know that this verse was not added to the Quran by later Muslims? Because again, here the you have to understand the mindset is, let's argue with this guy, because he is saying something that is completely ridiculous according to our point of view. What? The Quran is complete, preserved, and fully detailed. What about the religion that I inherited? Are you telling me this is false? I'm not gonna stand for that. Okay, so I'm just trying to get you to understand the question. So the first question was, how do you know nothing was deleted or added to the Quran after Prophet Muhammad? And the answer to that was, because God has said in the Quran that he has taken upon himself to preserve it. And then so the follow-up argument is that, okay, if you are going to use this verse to justify that nothing was added or deleted from the Quran, then how do you know that this verse was not added by the later Muslims? So now what do you say to that? Okay, so I'll give you an analogy, and I think it's pretty apt. If you go to a dealer and you are going to buy a new car, and he shows you the car and he says, "Look, this car has all these features, it has this and that, right? And look, it has four wheels." I don't know why a dealer would say that, but let's just assume he said, "Okay, look, it has four wheels. You know, it's all-wheel drive," and you say, "Wait a minute." You're saying it has four wheels, and he's like, "Yeah, it has four wheels." And we're like, "Well, how do I know that you didn't add another wheel to this car? That you didn't add the fourth wheel to the car? Maybe the car came with three wheels. So prove to me that this car uh, did not come with three wheels. It came with four wheels." So this is the question that's being asked with the Quran. That you have a book that's complete, fully detailed, preserved. The book itself is claiming that, but then you say, okay, how do I know that this verse is not added that says that this book is preserved? Um, Okay, so I guess a more of a philosophical bent answer would be that since you are making the claim that the Quran is not preserved, this is you're making this claim, right? That the Quran is not preserved. When it says that it's preserved, then the burden of proof is upon you to bring evidence that this verse was added by later Muslims, right? Show me the earlier manuscripts of the Quran where this verse was not in it, and then you have something to stand upon. Um, we are simply accepting the claims made by the Quran that it is complete, fully detailed, and preserved, and that God has taken upon Himself to preserve the Quran. But on a more abstract level, or more of a believer level, if you've actually spent time with the text, you will notice that the Quran is a whole book. It is. You can, if you take something out of it or put something into it, it will stick out as a sore thumb. That's really the key to it. So this verse, actually there are two verses that I want to bring that show that show that the Quran was preserved. This is chapter 15 verse 9. It says, "We send down the remembrance and we are its custodian." And then chapter 75 verse 17, it says, "Upon us is its gathering and its recitation." And furthermore, it says, "And when we recite it, follow thou the recitation thereof, then upon us is its clarification." So it's upon God to gather, recite the Quran, and to clarify it. This is what God has taken upon Himself. So, coming back to what I was saying about the Quran, if you treat it as a whole, you will see that there's not only one verse, there's many verses. And so they all kind of come together to give you that belief that the Quran is preserved. And if this verse was added, according to my uncle, where he said, okay, with this verse that it was added that we send down the remembrance and we are its custodian, well then this other verse needed to be added too in chapter 75 verse 17. "Upon us is its gathering and its recitation." And so this is how the Quran works. See, there's many places in the Quran where the same message is repeated in a different way, and this reinforces the text and serves to solidify it and make it a whole. So this is really the answer. But again, the true answer is that God guides whom He wills, and whom He misguides, there's none to guide. And so you just know. I like to say, and it's true, that reason can only take you so far. After that, then it's God who is holding you, and He is putting that certainty of faith in you. And so I accept the claim in the Quran that it is preserved and that is complete, fully detailed. Okay, next question. How do you know to pay 2.5% zakat since this percentage is not mentioned in the Quran? Actually, the Quran does talk about paying the excess of what you earn. Excess, and you know how much the excess is. I mean, you make monthly pay, whatever your monthly salary is, and this much goes towards groceries, this much goes towards food and rent and all that stuff, and then whatever you have in excess, then you should pay of that. What the amount is, the Quran doesn't talk about, because again, God wants us to use reason, and He has given us the facility, the understanding of how to do that. So it doesn't talk about 2.5%. And again, the Quran is not in the business of dictating every facet of how to live your life, which is something which religions love to do. By the way, they want to make you a robot. That's what they want to do. So they're those people who are born and bred on religions, they have a hard time accepting this responsibility to use their brain. Next question: why do you reduce Muhammad to the role of someone delivering a message only? Okay. A messenger technically is someone who delivers a message, right? That's what the word Rasul means. And the message in the case of the Muhammad was the warning and the deliverer of good news to mankind. And so that was his role. This is not us reducing Muhammad to the role of someone delivering a message. The Quran itself, God in many places talks to Muhammad and he says, communicate, and you are only a messenger and the deliverer of good news and warner. So this is Muhammad's claim, Muhammad's own role as defined in the Quran. You just have to read the Quran, guys. You just have to read the Quran carefully and see. I'm not saying that Muhammad was not a leader of his community. He was a leader, and there's many verses that talk about obeying the messenger in a military context and of giving him respect and listening to him, which shows you how deviant the people around him were, how rebellious they were. They were not willing to accept his command, in the sense what he was ordering in military context. This is the one context that you have to set aside any differences and just follow one man. The chain of command is so important. Incidentally, I made a video about obey God and the messenger, which Muslims love to use because they said it justifies the hadith, and obey God and obey the messenger, as in God is giving the commandments and the messenger is giving divine commandments, and they together form the crux of what we are to follow. That's not true. God is the one giving the commandments, and the Muhammad himself was following the commandments in the Quran. He was not issuing verdicts or edicts himself. But anyway, that video, obey God and obey the messenger, I show clearly where those phrases occur in the Quran and what the context is. And if you look at the context, you will see that overwhelmingly the context is about military, is a military context, as in they were at in a footing of war, and at that time Muhammad was to be obeyed. Okay, so this kind of leads into the next question: how do the Quranists know when a certain surah or verses were revealed, or what historical context reasoning a certain surah verse was revealed in? For example, who is God referring to when he's talking about two men in the cave in Quran chapter 9 verse 40? What is Allah referring to when the Quran talks about a secret between the Prophet and some of his wives? Okay, so I'm going to nitpick the question a little bit here, because this whole idea of historical context reasoning, this is the reason for the hadith to exist in the first place. And it's very clever how the hadiths are used to divert men from the message of the Quran, because what they do is they change the context of the verses of the Quran, and in this way they are able to manipulate the verses, because you have to understand that the Quran is incorruptible, and this is again one of the signs of the Quran's Quran being a word of God and being inspired by God and being a book of God and being preserved, is that the Muslims, even though they had 1400 years with this book, so they claim, were unable to change this book to conform to their religion. And what they had to do is they had to invent a completely separate literature called the hadith, and then use that to circle back on the Quran and to change the context of the verses and to change the meanings of the words. This is the only way they were able to corrupt the message, which is nothing new, by the way. The Jews had done the same thing. The Quran points that out in chapter 2, if you read, that the Jews were twisting the words, which means that they were changing the context, so they were changing the meanings of the words, and this is the way it's done. So this is the whole existence, this is the reason for the existence of the hadith, is to change the context. So if you are looking for the context and the reasoning for a surah in the hadith, then you are falling in shaitan's trap, in Satan's trap. You are falling, okay? This is what he wants you to do. What you need to do is actually treat the Quran as a whole and treat each chapter as a division, okay? That's how it's intended. Read the chapter from beginning to end, you will see most of the times that the chapter actually goes back. It starts out, and then at the end it refers back to the beginning. It's almost like encirclement. And then there are there are obviously subject divisions in that chapter. For chapter 2, obviously that's a big chapter, you're going to see those divisions happening. But if you keep the context in mind, it's so important, keep the context in mind. Go back and keep the context that's in the Quran in mind, not the hadith. Forget the hadith, delete that out of existence, okay? And don't look at the mufassir, the tafsirs, and all this commentary. And just go read the Quran text itself, get a good translation. I encourage you to get Brother Gann's translation. It is one of the literal translations, one of the best translations out there right now. Arbery is really good too. Go read it and try to analyze what the verses are. You will see the context come up to you. And if you're not understanding the context, and obviously the Quran was being revealed during Prophet Muhammad's lifetime, and there were contexts that were very specific, then guess what, it's not important for you to understand, okay? And this is really the key to this, because the knowledge of these things is not important for salvation. It's not vital. What is vital is that we get the big points, right? Don't cheat people, don't steal, don't fornicate, don't lie, don't mistreat your parents, don't just be a good Muslim, good submitter to God, and follow the guidance. That's really what the key is. Prepare for the day of judgment, do good deeds, give in charity, and fear God. This is important for salvation. So now the question is, what is the secret between the Prophet and some of his wives, and who God is referring to when he talks about the two men in the cave? This is the stuff. This is the itch that you want to scratch. What was the secret between the Prophet and his wives? Why do you want to know the secret? That's not a question you need to ask yourself, right? Why do you want to know that secret? Okay, next question. You do realize that the rituals of the religion are incomplete or unclear with just the Quran. So this guy shows his hand at the end. This question is one of those questions that you know what the key was anyway. This is what I started out with, right? That the rituals of your religion are not in the Quran, right? And so that you're saying this is the reason why you are disobeying God and disbelieving in the verses of God. This is what kufr is, by the way, the disbelief in the verses of the God. There's the disbelief where the atheist is completely denying the scripture of God, but then there's even a worse disbelief, which is hypocrisy, which you're saying, yes, I believe that this is from God, but we don't really believe it because it doesn't have our religion. Okay, so here's the question. You do realize that the rituals of religion are incomplete or unclear with just the Quran. Yet the Quranists love to claim that God says the Quran is clear and complete and doesn't need hadiths. Actually, we don't say that the Quran is clear and complete and preserved. The Quran itself claims that, and this is such a this is ridiculous that to claim that that the Quran is not clear and complete when the Quran itself is saying that it's clear and complete. So either you don't understand these clear verses in the Quran, or you deny God's book. There really is no other alternative here. And so it is precisely because we do not find the intricacies and rituals of the religion of Islam in the Quran that we reject them. And so the question to this Sunni or Shia or my uncle is that, will you abandon the blind following of the religion of your ancestors since you do not find their rituals in the book of God? Or will you continue to follow their footsteps and deny God's book? You shouldn't follow anything without knowledge, without any reason. And so there's high time for you to abandon the religion of your ancestors who were unfortunately blindly following the sheikhs, imams, and muftis, or the community, or that's really what was happening. And I can speak to that because I was born and bred in a Muslim Sunni household in Pakistan. So I have seen and done and heard all these things. I've been to mosques. I've listened to imams and muftis and sheikhs. I have performed. I have learned the prayer. I learned the Muslim prayers from my grandmother, and I went to the Kaaba Makkah and did Umrah over there. So I've seen all this. I've done all this. I know what I'm talking about, and imagine my surprise when I found out, when I encountered people who said that the Quran is sufficient, and it's all we need, and that just blew my mind. And unfortunately, I wouldn't even use the word fortunately. I would say that God, in His immense mercy, in His immense love, He guided me, and I saw, after reading the Quran, I saw that this, what is happening in Kaaba, in Makkah, is pure idolatry, which I had done, and I saw that what I had been practicing, what I had been following with these rituals, was all garbage, and the Quran is not speaking about these things. And instead of doing what these gentlemen do, the Sunni gentlemen or the Shia gentlemen who make fun, or who argue just for the sake of arguing, I actually sat down and I actually looked into these questions and these contradictions. And this again is God's guidance. It's not that I'm somehow special. I'm actually a pretty average person. I would even say probably lower IQ, and that's not to berate myself. Obviously, I've achieved things in my life, thanks be to God. But they're more smarter people than me. Let's just put it that way. They're geniuses out there, but they did not see what I was shown, and that's nothing to do on me. It's just how God works. He guides whom He guides. So, to come back to the original, I guess, question, is that what needs to happen, what you need to do if you made it all the way to the end of this audio podcast, which means you're sincere. And God says that He will, this is the pact between God and Satan, where Satan said, I will mislead them altogether except you sincere servants of God. So you are sincere. So if you are sincere, then repent to God, turn your life around, pray to God for guidance, and diligently, sincerely read the Quran. Take your time with it, and formulate your thoughts. Cut out all this, the lectures from the imams and muftis and the commentaries and what even your parents are telling you, your friends. Cut them out. Just focus on you and God, the relationship, and come clean to God. And if He wills, He will guide you, and you will gain the faith that you need. That's really all there is to it. Reason will only take you so far. After that, it's God. He holds your hand and pulls you to the light. So, I tried to keep this audio long, short, but didn't quite work out. I think we're at 43 minutes. So, God willing, I'll be making more videos, more audios like this. I think I'm going to get off the video format. I think this is a little bit more easier for me, less stress, and, you don't really want to see my face. I think it's good for us to kind of connect and just talk a little bit. Do please put in the comments what your thoughts are. If someone is wanting to look up the verses, I'm sure there's people who watch this channel who can probably point the brother or sister to the verses of the Quran that talk about these, that answer the questions. You can go to my playlist and look at specific questions like fasting and salah and zakah, sujood, ruku. All of this is done. I just don't want to keep going back and forth and pulling out these verses. I don't think it helps anyone. So, yeah, that's it for now. God willing, until next time, peace and blessings be upon you.